I am tall enough for the whole thing. Hey. Wow, you're in a totally different room. Oh, I can't hear you. You're no audio. Oh.
I'm kind of making a habit out of that now, I've noticed. Always forget to turn my mic on. Hey everyone, give me a sec. I will turn our funky electro swing music down. Something that we do in our lobby ahead of every broadcast is play a little bit of royalty-free audio off of YouTube, because we have some people who tune in early. Yeah, so you might as well entertain while they wait. So for those of you who've joined GameDev Cafe this afternoon, my name is Karina. I'm coming at you live from my home office. This is where we do all of our broadcasts at the moment. However, you will see us coming to you live from a couple studios in the very near future, so stay tuned for that. Today, I am very excited to introduce you to a couple of the folks from Reptoid Games. So thank you so much for joining us, Ryan and Simon. Actually, Simon and Ryan from left to right. Try to avoid confusion here. Yeah, I will certainly let you guys introduce yourselves and your roles, but I do want to mention how I sort of discovered your studio, which was through this year's Ubisoft Indie Series, a really cool initiative, very new. I think it's only in its second year from Ubisoft. They did it in Toronto and Montreal, and I got to see what you guys were working on at the Toronto event. I also really like dinosaurs, so there's all kinds of reasons for me to be talking to you today. But I think first and foremost, one of the reasons that we're eager to feature you is that you are a great example of a very successful indie studio, I think, by most measures of the word. And you guys can own that or not own that, depending on how modest you are. But please, let's start by letting us know who you are, what your role is with respect to the studio, and I guess maybe telling us how you came to be in this role at Reptoid Games.
You go first? Sure. Yeah, so Ryan and I have been friends for, I don't know, over 10 years now. We met super long ago working in a TV animation studio in Ottawa and worked together on a couple of projects, different departments, so we knew each other a little bit, but that was about it. But over the years we kept in touch, and then we both ended up in Toronto, and we just started hanging out and talking a lot about our past work experiences. And I was still working in animation, Ryan was teaching and getting into game dev stuff, and then a really good opportunity sort of came up at the spring of 2015 where it just seemed like we had a good opportunity to jump in and try doing something ourselves. We had a lot of ideas about how we thought stuff could be made, whether it's TV or games, and just how a company can work and how people can be very I don't know. There's a lot of really bad schedules and crazy production stories in any kind of animation and game studio, and I think both of us came to independently the conclusion of there has to be a better way. Yeah.
Well, we kind of realized every time we hung out, we hang out, play video games, whatever, and we always, every single time the topic went right to, if I ran a studio, I'd be this and this.
Of course.
Basically, constant bouncing ideas off each other. Here's how we should run a thing. Here's how this should work. And then it kind of each working independently in different companies, realizing that we're probably not going to take over the companies that we were working at the time, or that's not really what we wanted precisely.
Might not be appreciated.
We're hey, why don't we want to do business together? So that's been working out pretty well.
Okay, cool.
So it's about 2 years now that we've been around for.
Apparently we're very successful.
Apparently we're very successful, and that's good news.
By reputation, yes.
Yeah.
I guess is it something that you guys are planning on sticking with? And that sounds like a silly question. Of course, you're not going to abandon it. But is this sort of the type of relationship that you see being lifelong? Is this a friendship that's blossomed into a beautiful business relationship at this point?
I think we're totally just going to cash out, buy our yachts, and we're just going to and you only need to totally not about the deal.
Stay friends.
Yeah. One day it'll be perfect, and we'll get all the money, and there's not really any point of doing a second one. So that's the long-term plan.
That's true. It's not a terrible problem to have. Interesting. And I guess, is this something that you guys always then wanted to do? When you were younger, I'm not sure if you had parents who really wanted you to be a doctor.
Oh, you're freezing out. Oh, losing leg. Losing you.
Got me? Can you still hear me?
Okay, we're good.
Okay, excellent. Temporary lag. So my question there was whether this was something that you guys had always thought that you would pursue? You know, whether you sort of always wanted to maybe do this in secret. Is this sort of the career path that you had planned, or that your parents envisioned?
Want to start? Yeah, when I was like, in hindsight, yeah, totally. This is definitely what I ended up wanting to do. When I was like 12 years old or something, I think I mentioned this in the Indie Series video if anyone saw that. But when I was 12, I played a lot of like Mega Man, and I put together a pitch package for what I thought Mega Man 5 should be,
Oh, cool.
and actually got my parents to mail it to Capcom.
Oh, cool.
I also wanted to phone call to Capcom in Japan, and I got a lot of trouble for that. So and again, I grew up like drawing lots of pictures, playing with computers a lot. So I mean, in hindsight, it makes perfect sense that this is what I wanted to do. And I think when I started in animation, I always thought of myself as eventually getting into games. So yeah, this is definitely where I'm at.
And how about you, Simon? You too?
For me, it's like I don't know. When I think about what I wanted to do as a kid, I don't think as a kid I ever thought about what I wanted to do. That wasn't a question in my mind. But like looking back, I'm like, I freaking love video games. I played them all the time, and I actually did like tons of game dev as a kid because my dad was like, or is still a super nerd for technology stuff. So we had an Amiga 3000, which is
nice.
A very old kind of computer. And all the games that you came out with then, like they all just had editors. So you could just go in and change the sprites and the pixels and just do whatever. And then like the main drawing program on that computer was also, you just had like an animate or a draw mode. And so like playing with animation tools and editing sprites in games was like just a fun thing to do with your games. So I was like simply doing game dev and didn't know. That just seemed like, yeah, computers do cool stuff. What's the big deal? And I think that I worked with one of like the earliest versions of RPG Maker ever, when it was like a super simple program. It doesn't change that much, I guess. But again, I was like, hey, cool, you just make your own RPGs. You just put in the words and stuff. And yeah, I can tell a little guy to be here and say some stuff, but I can change out what that things need. And I completely forgot about game dev forever. I made cartoons for like 10 years. And then like working with Ryan, I was like, oh, hey, wait a second. Making games and making cartoons are like really similar pipelines, except I also super love video games and play them all the time anyway. So it seems like it really should have been more obvious.
Well, as you say, hindsight, right? I mean, video games haven't always been as cinematic is the word, but they haven't always incorporated the level of animation that maybe people aspire to. I know a lot of people who think movies are sort of the be-all, end-all when it comes to animation. I think games are quickly catching up, if they're not there already, really.
Yeah, the whole explosion of the indie scene, I think, for both of us is really encouraging and inspiring. The fact that, I know, particularly in terms of starting a business, the idea that really small teams were getting like very, very viable and doing some really interesting work with experimental indie games.
That's absolutely true. And the indie series that we're all sort of fortunate to be part of was a tiny slice of an example of that. I think it only featured like 6 or 8 teams as finalists. And I know, having done a few of these interviews, that there's so many out there. But you guys are certainly a team that people look up to, both in your success with the indie series, but I think because the game you're working on, Fossil Hunters, already looks like it's quite well developed. It seems like it has a lot of thought put into how it's going to roll out. We'll I guess get to that in a moment. But with respect to the studio itself, as a setup for the success, how did it start? How did you start to build your team? How did you sort of establish yourselves as not just 2 guys who want to make games together, but an actual studio, an indie studio?
When we started, we enacted something we called cockroach mode. And cockroach mode is basically, we both have a certain amount of savings saved up. So we're fairly good with our money, I guess.
We were the 2 guys who just wanted to make games.
We were the 2 guys who just wanted to make games. So we realized that we didn't want to be, working out of our houses. We've done that before for various contract work in the past, and it's not the right fit for us. It's not really in line with what we wanted to build. So we got some of the office space that they rent out at Gamma Space. It's called Bento Miso back then.
Nice.
So we had offices together in the same room at this co-working space, which is really kind of getting involved in the Toronto gaming community, which we weren't really all that super familiar with at the point. And that was a great place to start the business. And then part of this kind of dovetails into how we came up with the idea for Fossil Hunters as well. But when we first started, we kind of subjected ourselves to this gauntlet of game jams Where I think
Sounds so intense.
I think we did
Content is
5.
appropriate.
Yeah, we did. It was over the course of a month. I think it was a little over a month. Basically, we gave ourselves 1 week to do a game, and then we shipped it, finished it, and then moved on to another one. So
Finished.
Well, it's like game jam finished, right? Like you can play it. It
That's
needs a lot more
finished,
work,
technically.
but yeah, the idea, quick iteration, and if we were thinking the entire time, one of these is probably going to have some kind of legs if we just kind of keep iterating on it. So one of those was eventually destined to kind of go on to pitching and funding and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting. And were those game jams, were they mostly like local, or did you guys do the kind of big online, like Ludumdar?
Well, these were just the two of us. Like,
yeah, these weren't real games. Just us deciding
when we started the business,
like self-imposed deadlines. Yeah.
We both decided to be full-time right from the start as we were doing the business, because we realized that doing freelance work and stuff in the evenings just really cripples our ability, and we needed to learn a lot really fast.
Right.
As long as Ryan and I have been friends, we actually haven't done a ton of work together, like on the same project. So we knew that was potentially a vulnerability for us. So we wanted to really just dive in and start doing work together. And so we both believe in execution and like multiple iterations. So we're like, okay, what's the fastest way for us to try going through this process of coming up with an idea, prototyping it, and just getting something working. So we were full-time right away, and we're like, okay, every week we'll just make a new game and push through it and just bump into as many of the problems as we can right away. So it was really sort of a conscious effort. So we just decided we had actually done a few game jams, like at Toronto Game Jam, local game jam, before we'd actually started, which got us sort of like the feeling of like working together that way. So, but yeah, it was a way for us to lean into something that we just had a lot of uncertainty about, which was just the reality of pipeline and us working together in it.
Actually, that was going to be my next question is, were you using it not just to prototype sort of concepts, but also the pipelines that you would eventually use as a studio to make it happen? I've heard that from quite a few different dev teams, because people often ask, why would you want to do a game jam? It's stressful, and you're, as I said, sort of self-imposed deadlines, but deadlines nonetheless. There's the whole, C word, crunch, just to clarify. But the question, I guess, for a lot of people is what's the value that you're getting out of it? And if you're making, as you say, a conscious effort to continuously iterate into something that you're going to run with, it's sort of clear that it's not a waste of time. You're leading up to something. How long did it take you to hit on Fossil Hunters? Like, was that an early idea that you came back to, or did it sort of come out of lots of different iterations and sort of finishing things and moving on? And
lots of iterations.
Well, basically, we decided to do the five game jams. So we did 5 games in 5 weeks or so. Some of them were more game than others, but like, we're like, okay, well, we can't just do this forever. And at that point, we were getting like a little tired of like constantly throwing away stuff and never really finishing it. So we realized that there's some limitations. If you can't really explore the full pipeline without time to polish or to do marketing or any of that business. So we're like, okay, well, this isn't going to let us explore everything, but we need to pick one and decide to go with it. So we did pick one, and then basically we ended up reinventing it like 4 times over the next 3 months or 4 months or however long we were working on it. And it turned into Fossil Hunters. It certainly wasn't Fossil Hunters.
It wasn't even about fossils.
No, it's like bones. There were bones in the game, and then we realized carrying them was cool. And then it was, I think it was my wife actually who mentioned like, hey, what if you make skeletons out of them? And we're like, oh, heck yeah, that's cool. And then like one day we decided to just like, what if we just just put that as the main feature? And it was like immediately compelling. And we just felt like, oh, this is cool.
I mean,
and so
like I said, everyone kind of like likes dinosaurs, and everyone has this idea of, I guess, treasure hunting is sort of like what the game kind of calls up, like seeking out things that are then somehow valuable and cool and different.
We find secret valuable stuff. Kind of a fun angle, right?
Well, and I think the fact that you can play alone or with other people, and from what I've seen of the game, it looks like it would be a lot of fun either way. It's not a game that's sort of dependent on you getting a team together, because that's sometimes not so fun if you can't.
So that's the takeaway, because that is exactly what we were going for.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, I've only seen whatever's publicly available, just to make it clear to anyone watching. It's not like I've gotten some sneak peek. I think what you guys have put out publicly is quite I mean, it's beautiful. I think the aesthetic is really great. You guys have really nailed, the feel of a polished game here. And I don't actually even know what point you're at. No one ever really knows, right? That's a studio secret. But, it looks great, but it also looks really fun. And that's sometimes hard to convey when you are early on in your, sort of marketing and pitch process. I know that you guys are about to launch a Kickstarter behind this game as well. Do you want to talk a little bit just about what the Kickstarter's goals are and sort of what your hopes are around that campaign, just while we're looking at Fossil Hunters?
Yeah, so our Kickstarter is going to go live tomorrow, so that's pretty exciting. Awesome. Yeah, so that's gonna be all over social media, and links will be up there. Right now, there is a Steam page, a coming soon page, that people can wishlist and have a look at some early materials that we have. Just a little video clip and some screenshots and stuff. So that's probably the most information we have right now. Awesome. But then tomorrow will be all over the place. The main goal for our Kickstarter is we're doing this sort of later in production. We've been over about a year and a half on Fossil Hunters, and it looks pretty polished because it kind of is. We're building out a lot of the content we need for the final game, but we're definitely getting a lot closer to the end than the beginning. So we're not looking for we need this money to make the game at all. It's kind of we're not getting the whole budget for the game. No, basically, because we are fortunate enough position that we do have a lot of that in place. The game is getting released, the game is getting finished, so that's really nice to be secure in that. Yeah, and then the main goal with getting the funding through Kickstarter is sort of a quality of life thing. This is a matter of we can get it done, but how much stuff is going to have to be rough around the edges for us to be able to get it out the door. And we want to make sure we've got the resources to really polish the features that we know are important to people.
Interesting. I think it's nice as a backer, and I'm someone who's backed just a very few number of projects because I'm reluctant to do it sometimes. But I think when you see a project that is very far along and you know that it's going to come to fruition, those sort of icing on the cake type campaigns are actually really attractive to someone who sees a lot of games.
Yeah, we don't want there to be a lot of unknowns when you're backing this game. We want people to feel this is what it looks like. It's going to be as fun as you think it is. So.
Guaranteed. And I am interested.
A lot of gaming Kickstarters have had a bit of a bad rap lately, where they take a bunch of money, then they get delayed, or they never come out, and then you pledged all this money, and you're not getting your stuff. And I think that's what's kind of created this trend towards your Kickstarter comes out later in development, and it's less in the spirit of kickstarting something. You're really finishing something.
Yes, actually,
but I mean, your website.
Kick finish. Oh my gosh. Okay, go patent that right now. Hold on.
It works much better for the people that are actually backing the projects, because they want to be part of a sure thing. They don't. It's hard to pitch an idea that hasn't really started yet, or that's still in the ideation phase, because it's just difficult to see how that game's going to turn out. So.
And on the flip side, I imagine it's hard to budget that project as well. So knowing some of those unknowns early on can make the Kickstarter campaign that much stronger. It's funny, I was going to ask you guys whether that was a concern of yours, just sort of the notoriety of Kickstarter and games, and sort of the current state of, the issue in the industry. But I think that the more, positive examples that we do see of Kickstarter games that are great no matter what, as you say, they're going to get done, they're going to come out, and then maybe a little extra comes to the community as a result of that support. That can only help the situation. So good on you guys, and we'll make sure to link this for anyone who's watching now or even later after the fact. This goes live in 24 hours, so we'll be able to link directly to the page. For now, Steam Wishlist is a great place, and you can also, as you say, see a lot of the screenshots and some of the art that I was gushing over. I really like the music as well. We're not playing it right now on the stream, but it's Robbie Duguay from Toronto. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Great, and I mean, if you're not familiar, he's a great musician. We're looking forward to talking to him this fall as well. Yay. I guess when it came to Fossil Hunters, I mean, we've talked a little bit about how the game was conceived and, some of the funding, marketing stuff that you're in the weeds with right now. But in terms of the development of the project and actually building this style of game, was there anything that was sort of standout about the development process, either, in a really good way or even in a really challenging way? What was sort of the best and the hardest thing about making this game?
I think that right off the top of my head, I'd say that the lighting and the whole shader thing that has been ongoing.
Yeah, we didn't want, there's there's kind of a default Unity game look out there that's getting a bad rap these days.
Yeah.
There's that Twitter thing or that Steam Unity thing that happened a few weeks ago.
One word.
So before that post was even out, I mean, we wanted to have the game. We wanted the game to have a very specific kind of visual style. Maybe I should let Simon talk about this because he's the creative director. But we wanted the game to have a very specific style. We wanted it to look very, not like other games. So I think one of the ways that we were doing that is, we wanted to have a custom lighting model for the game. So kind of the most recent thing I can compare it to is like you look at Zelda Breath of the Wild, right? They've got cell shading in all the characters and like a little bit of a Fresnel rim light around them, and the environment's shaded a little bit differently, and it makes the game look very kind of specific and unique.
Yes.
And it helps you fulfill a very specific kind of art style. So that was really important to us to get off the ground. How is this lighting happening? Is it cell shading? Is it smooth shading? Is it kind of a mix of both? As well as how does lighting work? We're building an underground game, right? So usually when you're building an underground game, like the default that you kind of slip into is like, okay, everything's black, and there's a bunch of yellow lights everywhere illuminating brown things. That's a really boring look. There's a lot of boring games right now. So the art team here has done a really good job not making the game look like Brown Town.
That's very true. And there seems to be a lot of sort of, I guess, inspiration within the game beyond being in a cave too. Like there's a lot of areas that don't look like caves, that feel like you're in these secret little spaces. There's a lot of different worlds and environments, even just in the trailers and sneak peeks that you guys have put out. It looks like a fun game to explore. So you've achieved.
Yeah, that was a big thing. One of the early inspirations for the game was like the classic Journey to the Center of the Earth movie. And I'm talking about like the 50s.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen it, oh boy, is it a good watch.
It's on YouTube. It's
easy to find. Yes, totally worth watching.
It's absolutely amazing to watch, but it's just like this crazy journey where there's like jungles and oceans and
the underground ocean, of course.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Just everything's under there. Who cares? It's got its own weather system. It doesn't matter. It's just like, but there's something fantastical about that sort of scientific discovery angle. There is one, like a character at one point is asking, why are we even doing this? And the scientist's answer is like, well, because it's there, and it's the human nature to explore things that are there. And like that never talked about again.
Yeah, nobody questions it. They're like, okay,
that situation, but like, hey, it's
sense.
here, we gotta do it. Someone's gotta go down here. We gotta do it because we know that. And so that was just inspiring in terms of like we think that there's a fun aesthetic to the underground vibe, and in terms of the lighting model, one of the main goals is that we get the sense that you're in a cave, but it's not like dark and scary all the time. And so we've got like these bright sunspots that are coming in. And so we've got these special areas of like bright light, but also that it feels like, you can still see what's going on. And then we want to change it up so there's a different feeling of environments as you're going to new places.
Interesting. And do you want to speak to the characters a little bit? Because I know that there's obviously a female character featured really prominently in the trailer. Did you guys come up with characters based on anything in particular? Are the characters something that you can customize as a player? I'm not too sure about how that was sort of.
Yeah, so we went back and forth on this a lot. So my background working in television is very like narrative focused. And so early on, there was a lot of talk about having specific characters with names and stories and a lot of dialogue systems for people talking. But as we started looking into the way the game is played and how people engage with it, there's a lot more collaboration, a lot more interactivity, and a lot more sort of dynamic behavior. And so putting people on rails with a narrative story just felt like it's good in its own right, but it wasn't matching the gameplay. And so we ended up taking a step back from that, keeping a lot of our designs. Now what we're going toward is using them as an aesthetic guide and creating a lot of customization. So we want these characters to exist in the game. So they'll probably be NPCs and characters you can find. But what we want is for people to be able to build their own characters that all sort of match that kind of style.
And you get that kind of self-insert, like you feel like you are the character, not you are along for the character's journey and kind of watching it.
So yeah, this is the kind of thing where, we are still going to have a narrative angle to it, and some of that is limited in terms of how much time we have, and again, something that Kickstarter can help with. Just a matter of how. Okay, so this is one thing about the user experience in general for this game is we want everything to be kind of like, I call it mashable, right? We want you to be able to press buttons and just figure out the game a lot of the time. So we've been really pushing hard to avoid any big menus or pop-up windows or screens whenever possible, and let people experience the game by holding things and dragging them around, even limiting inventory and items and stuff as much as possible. So in the same way, having a lot of like locked-in narrative really felt antithetical to this, like, people should be able to run around and do what they want. So we kind of want, if there's going to be more of a narrative, we're going to probably do it with as little dialogue as we can, or like text, and do it more with the places that you're going through and sort of like a silent narrative. We also have a journal system where you can open up like this notebook that actually does come up, but it's got drawings and a bunch of information in it. So you're tracking your game objectives, but you're also getting story notes about things that are happening. And if there are characters, instead of having their entire story come up through dialogue that you advance, you can have a little bit of dialogue from them, and then you can find out extra notes inside your book if you choose to engage with that. So we're not forcing players to like watch or read our book that we wrote. But if you're really interested, we're going to have some Easter eggs and extra story information in there.
That's nice. Yeah, to be able to dive in at different levels, especially with this type of game where, again, it is fun to play both with people, maybe where you're not paying that much attention, and by yourself, where you might want to dig in a little bit deeper. I do really like the character customization, especially since you can customize a lot of the fossils. I like that kind of plays over. Oh, and I also really like that the place where I think, from what I read correctly, the place where you build those fossils is literally a sandbox. That's kind of
yeah, it is.
that's funny. That's cute. Really cool. I guess you know, when it came to Fossil Hunters, is this sort of the game for your studio? Like, is this going to be the figurehead game, or do you have other games in the works at the same time? Because it sounds like this is a big project. There's a lot to do. As you say, you have a lot on your plate. So is this sort of your primary focus for the time being?
Yeah, this is our flagship game, like, by far. It's
Awesome.
It's the biggest game we've all worked on before. It's definitely representative of like what we want to bring to the world of gaming.
It's going to be huge and make so much money.
I hope so. I mean, it's been well received. It's award-winning. It took home top spot at the Toronto Ubisoft Indie Series, as we mentioned. I'm really hello, whoever you're speaking with.
Oh, this is Jamie, just
Producer's here.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Hi, Jamie.
Come say hi, Jamie.
It's always nice when people drop in. Actually, it's a great time for her to come in. I was just about to ask you guys, Jamie, you can answer this too. I was going to ask you if there were any video games that have particularly influenced you, maybe from your past or childhood, or even from more recently, but especially if it led to the making of Fossil Hunters, and even if it didn't. Anything that sort of sticks out in your mind?
You guys gonna go first?
Spelunky's a big one.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah, we talked about Spelunky a lot early in development. We don't talk about it quite as much anymore because I think its influence has kind of taken root and found a place. So and this actually relates to the story stuff we were talking about a minute ago as well. You know, when you play that game, obviously Fossil Hunters isn't a hard mode Metroidvania like Spelunky is.
Yeah.
But the angle of kind of an emergent story of playing, you know, you can play Spelunky a bunch of times over and over again, and then you can tell someone a story about how it went, right?
Yeah.
And it can be different every time. You can get surprised. You can find things you don't usually find. Things can happen that don't usually happen. And there's a lot of really interesting emergent story that kind of comes out of it. As well as just the whole, you know, the theme is kind of similar. There's a bit of an Indiana Jones thing going on.
Yeah, totally.
You're getting yourself deeper and deeper into, you know, underground and into trouble, and kind of managing that risk and reward a lot. So that game's been a really big influence for us as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's a great example. And it's kind of obvious now that I think of it, but it wasn't initially. Huh, cool. Anyone else?
Yeah, different angle. For me, more for like a personal inspiration thing. I didn't really thought about games that much because I just like played whatever games were cool and ones that me and my friends would play before I was into the games industry. But then I remember there was a definite turning point where indie games started being like more on my radar, and I think it was Bastion by Supergiant that caught my attention early on. And I remember like sort of this distinct phase of like me not being aware of indie games. And I remember seeing like Bastion splash art on like an NVIDIA like install screen. I'm like, that's weird. Why are games showing up here? And like, that looks cool. And then forgetting about it. And then later, like a good deal later, a friend of mine like gifted me a copy of the game. And I played it and I'm like, oh, this is like really different than other games. And it's like, it looks good, but it's like, there was just a different vibe to it. And that was one of the first times where like, I think I started perceiving like that, like there's really high quality games, but with a completely different structure to then like the big AAA games existed. And of course, it's an amazing game too, but just that that really stands out to me as something that sort of changed my perception of games and sort of expanded that.
Yeah, no, another really good example. Jamie, how about you?
I think a really obvious one is Minecraft.
Nice. Yeah.
When I was playing Minecraft, it was back when the game was sort of more bare bones, and there was more, there was a little less to do. So the element for me of like being alone in this underground world where you don't know what kind of treasure or monsters you're going to find, like specifically that sense of it's you or maybe you and a friend against this entire, like this huge cave. And you've got your trusty pickaxe, you've got a couple of tools, and you want diamonds, you want monsters, you know, like you're just trying to find that next like crazy treasure that you don't know whether or not it's even going to be there. And you're going to take it back to your base and like bulwark it against the dark. And like that's a really big thing for me back when I was playing Minecraft like years and years ago.
Very cool.
Bulwark in the dark. Whoa.
Alone in the dark, looking for monsters and diamonds. That should be like a Minecraft commercial. I've not played much Minecraft, but I think it might be because of what you just pointed out. I feel like the game is very complex now, and almost like the entry point would be like way beyond my reach, maybe. Whereas I know people who've been playing it forever, and they're like, it didn't used to be that way, man.
Yeah.
So I think it might depend on when you get into it. Now, with Fossil Hunters, I mean, this is sort of a game that mirrors that in a sense. Are there any other games on the market that you're I don't know, looking to as sort of examples, and maybe not so much for gameplay that is like Fossil Hunters, but maybe other indie games that are super success stories currently, or other indie games maybe who've run a Kickstarter who, you know, might sort of be an inspiration for you?
Yeah, well, I think a lot, like we've done a lot of research on Kickstarter, but I find a lot of the games, like a lot of the campaigns we like are not games that are similar to ours. This is something that we found in general looking around, is that Fossil Hunters is kind of not like a lot of other games, which is
true, yeah.
Original, but it's kind of hard to compare. I think one of the earliest sort of like, I guess, landmarks for me in terms of like indie game scope was the game SteamWorld Dig.
Oh, okay. I haven't played it, but I've heard of it, and it's actually been mentioned before.
Yeah, I mean, I played it, and it's just like, it's really appealing. It's really, really solid. Everything about it is polished and tight, and the scope of the game is like, it feels really controlled, where like it knows exactly what it is. It's like maybe 6-7 hours of gameplay, depending how you play, but like it's got just the right amount of like progression elements, and like you can find stuff, but not that much stuff, and it just felt like the pacing and the style and everything was like exactly scoped right at the time that it was. I just really loved the feeling of playing through that game, and that was something that for me has been personally really successful. And I think for the company that did that, they're doing really well too with that game.
Awesome.
Who's coming out?
The sequel's coming out soon. I'm excited for that.
Not that they need any promotion, but yeah, I'm not afraid to give it to them.
But yeah, that sense of scope.
Never a problem in the indie community to give a little shout out.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I will say that Reptoid Games, you know, has quite a following. Like you guys, I know you have a strong social presence and you guys have been very active, but leading up to the campaign, I feel like you already have a lot of support for this. So best of luck. That's
awesome.
Really exciting for you guys too. Are there any people in the gaming industry who you look up to? I hesitate to say hero, maybe that's like the wrong word, but mentors, or, you know, just people who you think have sort of are on the right track or have the right idea when it comes to indie games?
Right. When it comes to indie games.
Oh, it doesn't have to be indie, I guess. Games in general.
I got a bunch of obvious people to name that like were an especially big influence to me right when we were starting, and the couple of years leading up to starting Reptoid, stuff like Rami Ismail, the other Lambier guy, Jan Willem, I think. For me, I'm like really new to the games industry, and I feel like I kind of just like dove in head first, and I'm like still trying to not drown. So I find like as I jumped in, I like really don't know anybody in the game industry, even like celebrities or otherwise. So it's been the last 2 years have been a lot of meeting local developers and like getting to know the indie scene and seeing like websites and stuff like Gamasutra with lots of you know, who's active there and stuff, and just really sort of I kind of just like everyone is just so helpful all the time that I'm like, I don't feel like there's an obvious pedestal. And at the same time, indie games are kind of,
to me, as sort of like a recent outsider, I feel like it's kind of seems like the Wild West a little bit with indie games right now, because the technology has gotten so powerful, and the rules are like really relaxed now that you can make games under like a pretty low budget with small numbers of people. I feel like people are doing everything, and there's so many people, and so one person might be running their indie studio and doing a really good thing in one area, like how they make a game. Another studio might be nailing the marketing, but maybe their game design isn't on point as much. So I have a really hard time picking a specific person or a company I would say is a hero. I just think I'm really impressed at like the tenacity of the industry and how people are just diving in and doing crazy stuff. And I just think it's a really exciting time to be here. So I'm kind of looking at everybody and just want to meet everybody and find out like what is your crazy thing that you're doing with your
Well, that's a good perspective to have as you say, a recent outsider. I feel like if you haven't been in the industry for too long, you also can't be jaded, and you're very open to it. I'm a pretty recent newcomer too. I've only been in games for a couple years now, but I came from major entertainment and media, and it's not as friendly, or it doesn't feel as friendly. So I totally echo what you're saying about the community. Jamie, is there anyone that you want to sort of just give a shout out to?
Like, even just really recently, because I agree with Simon that they're like everybody deserves accolades, and everybody that we've met has been so fun. But I super respect what Rebecca Cordingley and the team is doing with Ooblets.
Yes,
right.
Nice. Such a cute game. Oh my god.
Yeah, they've been doing such great work, and it's been really nice to see that really take off for them, and the kind of response they've gotten, as well as what Gabby DiRienzo and Andrew Carvalho are doing with Laundry and A Mortician's Tale, because they also they've got a really good niche, and they're working to raise awareness of also specific issues as well with their game, and I really appreciate the sort of traction they've been able to get with that in their niche, and that game looks awesome. So
totally, yeah, those are some really great examples. And again, just like it's hard to pick people, I think, because there are so many great examples in the community, and you can come back in a month and there'll be even more exciting games on the tip of people's tongues. So I am, again, counting you guys in that community that I'm speaking of, because I do think that you guys have something pretty special here. And JB, I know you just recently joined us, but I was gushing earlier about sort of the look and feel of Fossil Hunters. So I'm excited to see how the Kickstarter goes for you guys. Now, I hesitate to ask because this may not be set in stone yet, but do you have an anticipated release date? And is it something that you'd want to share at this point in time?
We're looking in the ballpark of March.
Ballpark's cool.
So
that's not too far away then. Okay, cool.
Yeah, 2018, pretty soon.
I think I can deal with that.
Wait much longer.
Very cool. And I gather you guys will probably be taking the game out on the road to different events. I know you guys are already at Fan Expo this weekend. You're just at, I believe, the Gaming Garage as well at the CNE. Is there anything else coming up that people should be aware of or be on the lookout for you to come and check out the game?
We might be in Ottawa next month, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah, there's an animation festival there that we might have a lead on some gaming event that's happening as a part of it. So that could be cool. And this is not really set in stone, but we're hoping that next year to do GDC, if that's in the cards.
That would be super cool. I would love to see you guys there. Very exciting.
If that works out too. It's a lot of unknowns still, but that could be really good timing for us. So.
Absolutely. We can always see how the Kickstarter goes, and then decide how much time you really have available.
Yeah. As much as we'd love to go to PAX and what was the one that just finished? Gen Con? Not Gen Con.
Gamescom.
Thank you. As much as we'd love to go to like every single thing, because I love showing off the game. I love watching people play it. I love hearing what they think about it, and I love what comes out of those playtest sessions, because then we get to figure out, oh my God, people love this part of the game. Let's build it out more, because we're getting a really strong response from it. I was excited about this too, but I didn't know that it was going to land so well. As much as we love all that kind of stuff, like we have limited resources, and we were pretty sure events is expensive.
Well, and the reality is
that
if we leave to go to an event, then the game's not getting done. So like once the game is launched,
maybe we'll have more. Yeah. Well,
so we're just balancing that.
We'll get to sort of the milestones first, and I'll ask you guys in our next interview whether we can see you live. But it is great that you guys are taking it out at least locally. I think the exposure is certainly well deserved. I think a lot of people will be excited to see the game, but it's nice to see I think, again, a small team sort of enjoying that success and getting some public attention. I guess, and Jamie, this is throwing this at you maybe last minute, but feel free to answer if you have an answer. But the final question that I have for you guys today, as I mentioned, we have a lot of people who watch this this broadcast and sort of subscribe to our website who want to make games professionally, and they don't really know how. And that could be because they don't know where to begin learning. It could be because they just don't know how to go from the jam phase to the, I'm making this as my job phase. But I'd be really interested to know if you guys have any advice for people who are in that sort of just starting out phase. And it doesn't have to be, advice for how to be successful. That's a tough pill to swallow. But maybe something that you yourself would have maybe benefited from hearing, at an earlier stage in your game dev career.
Oh, Ryan. So, don't be afraid to get your hands messy. What's that mean? What that means is it doesn't mean go around and commit crimes. That's not what that means.
Oh, okay.
Well, that got dark. So when I started in games, like I started in animation first. I was a computer animator, compositor, model, texture, all the art stuff. And I had always wanted to make games, but I didn't really have the ability to. And I think a lot of people who want to get into games get this idea in their head that I need to make a friend who programs. I need a programmer friend to program all this stuff for me because I have all these ideas. And of course, I have lots of ideas. Like it's fun to come up with game ideas. Ideas are kind of cheap, but if you don't make them, they're not really worth anything. So when I learned how to program, I just learned how to program through kind of belligerence. I didn't go through any official means. I was just self-taught, and I just cracked open a copy of Unity, started writing awful code, searching through stuff like Unity Answers, the forums, just like random tutorial sites, and I just wrote the worst code. But my goal was really clear of I want to get this thing working, right? Like I want to make a Diablo-style character movement, right? I want to click somewhere on the screen and the character walks towards that clicked spot. And like that was my laser focus. Here's what I need for the game in order to get to that next step, in order to get that next kind of foothold and claw my way up. So look for those footholds and just like do whatever you got to do to kind of get there and figure it out. That's going to kind of build the confidence, build the experience, and let you kind of keep going. Don't expect yourself to be able to make a perfect game in the first try. You're going to make tons of crazy mistakes. And the idea is not to make a great game by not making any mistakes. You want to make a great game by just building up that experience and proving to yourself that you can do all these things. So then eventually that kind of adds up into just a great deal of ability.
And confidence, I imagine.
And confidence, exactly. And then the next thing comes up that you don't know how to do, you're like, well, whatever. I've done a million things that I don't know how to do before. I'll just figure it out because I did last time and I probably will this time again.
That makes good sense. Yeah, that's really good advice. Awesome.
Also, get involved in the community too, especially people local in Toronto, which I imagine a lot of your viewership probably is.
Yep.
Toronto's got an awesome gaming community. Everyone's super nice here. So hubs like Gamma Space, the Game Jams, like Toronto Game Jam is excellent. Global Game Jam is good. George Brown College does one like all the time now.
Yeah, like every weekend it seems.
Yeah, so like I keep seeing those notifications on Facebook all the time. But just getting involved, getting your hands dirty, and building something, even if it's not that great, just get making stuff, and you'll improve.
Excellent.
Jamie?
I was going to say, if you're looking to, especially our local listeners, if you're maybe looking to go from the game jam level, maybe you're a little beyond the level Ryan's talking about, and you're looking to sort of make that leap into something bigger, don't be afraid to go after some of the grants that are available. The Ontario government is really wants to help people make games, and maybe you don't feel like you're ready, but maybe try, do something little, get the ball rolling for yourself.
On that topic, Hand-Eye Society is running a workshop for figuring out how to submit to OMDC grants, right?
That is very true. We will link that up because I know OMDC funding has been behind a lot of very successful studios and games in Toronto.
They're wonderful. They're amazing. Yeah.
It's in a surprisingly large fund. Ontario, I agree, Jamie, is super supportive of that. And yeah, I think to your point about like not being afraid to apply, like you might be surprised, pleasantly surprised by the type of projects that they're looking to fund.
Yeah, exactly. And don't be afraid of paperwork. Like a lot of running business is paperwork, and I know it's not making games, and I know it's not as glamorous or as sexy as working in Unity or as drawing, but it's important, and you can get a lot just by sort of not being intimidated by the paperwork. Take it one field at a time on the form. Ask people for help, and just putting a little bit of time into that will make a lot of returns for you.
Yeah, so like riffing on what Jamie just said, that like dovetails pretty well. This is something that I feel like, again, as sort of someone new to this industry, I feel like a lot of people come into game development with the idea that, especially with school programs called game development programs, that you are just going to show up and I'm just going to do it. I'm going to make games. But I feel like it's really important to recognize that making games has a whole bunch of stuff attached to it, and taking the time to think about like your own like personal preferences and your self-awareness about what it is that you like the most about the process. What do you actually really, really love about what you're going to do? Some people want to do literally every single part of it, and that's super awesome. It's there, but like some people just want to draw. Some people just want to come up with ideas. Some people just want to program. So taking the time to realize, for one, like making games doesn't necessarily mean you need to make a company. Making games doesn't mean that you need to do it full time, right? Having a hobby making games is just as good as making money making games. And like making a game that is like super commercially viable is actually not what everyone wants to do. So feeling like you have to make it viable, like that's not true. Like you don't have to do that. So being aware of what you love and what your goals are can help you avoid a lot of trouble down the line. And for people who are starting a company who do want to make money, I would say like the next step after that is to be really aware about the fact that the making the game part is one thing, marketing and that whole deal is another, and then like running a business itself, these are all three completely separate disciplines that have to exist. They absolutely have to exist if you want to make any kind of money. But they're all like equally powerful and difficult to do. So if you're not super excited about all of them, then I think it's really important to pay attention to which stuff you are excited for. Look for some, find some partners, and make sure that you guys can all cover it together or trade off those things. And yeah, I say so. Just avoid lumping everything into let's make games without really thinking about what stuff you want to spend your time on and how much time you want to spend doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because games is like making games is one of the most cross-disciplinary things I can think of. There's so many different professions that require a huge level of mastery that are involved in it.
It's okay to not want to do all those things. That's fine. I feel like it's really easy for people to torture themselves and spend hours and hours maybe trying to learn how to do spreadsheets, and then realize, I actually hate doing this.
Not only that, but there are those people out there who love doing it and who don't like doing what you're doing. So yeah, I think that's the one thing that I've noticed about all the small teams that I've spoken to at GameDev Cafe, whether it's just a pair of people in their basement or a team of 5 or 6, relatively small studio, they know how to specialize, and they recognize that if it's a skill that you don't have or don't really want to do or can't do easily for whatever reason, it's better to hire out rather than to try and take that onto your plate and risk sort of losing focus, or even worse, losing passion. I think that's probably what a lot of as you say, these people who want to make games, they may not want to do all the little nitty-gritty logistics behind that game itself. But very good advice, and I think measured and realistic, because we're all positive people. It's a very friendly community, but it is nice and I think refreshing for you guys to just sort of share some of these point-blank insights with us. So thank you so much. I guess as a final point, as I mentioned before, we'll make sure that we're linking up to your Kickstarter so everyone can find it. It goes live in 17 hours, 59 minutes, and 3 seconds. So very exciting. We'll keep an eye out for that. Is there, I guess, anything that I know that you guys have a mailing list that people can sign up for related to the Kickstarter. Is there anything that fans should be on the lookout for between now and sort of that launch date? So, for example, are you going to be making any announcements about the game? Do you have any sort of plans to release more trailers, or just anything that people can get their hands on before that release date?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the first place is the social media. I think right now we're the most active on Twitter, but Instagram and Facebook are going to get a lot of love in the next couple of weeks.
Great.
So yeah, whatever your favorite platform is, follow us there. And of those three, those are the ones.
Perfect. No problem.
We're not doing Google Plus anymore?
No.
Aw. No Snapchat for you guys?
Not yet. Maybe we will.
Maybe we'll get a little bit more hip in then.
It's a lot to juggle, and you are making a game in the meantime. So, but totally understandable. So for those of you watching, we'll make sure again that we link all this up, so it's very easy for you guys to find and follow Reptoid Games and see all the progress on Fossil Hunters. I guess on that note, I will thank you guys once again for joining us. This has been really insightful. It's great to hear about both how you personally got started, but just how the studio and the game came to be. It's very exciting, and I think you guys are definitely on the track to success here. I look forward to seeing Fossil Hunters, but yeah, hopefully you guys don't wind up working yourselves too hard, and hopefully you can make it out to GDC at the very least next year, because I think that would be a really great experience for the game and for everyone.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having us, Karina. And then one more thing I was going to say is that for any of the aspiring game devs out there, if you guys are looking for more advice or more information, hit us up on Twitter or whatever and ask us questions, because we actually super like helping people who are trying to get their start or have any questions about it. So we're pretty good at responding quickly. So yeah, we're super open to that.
And I taught game development for several years.
Oh, nice.
College level as well. So I'm happy to help you with that, how to do the nitty gritty.
So he'll give you good advice. I'll just tell you stuff.
I'll give you specific advice.
I'll get two sides of it anyways. No wonder you guys are so good at this. Well, thanks again for joining us. That's a great offer. We'll make sure again that people can find you easily online. Jamie, glad you could join us at the end. Hopefully we didn't cut into your workday, but we just sort of usurped just a little bit of time. Thanks everyone else for watching. My name's Karina, again, from GameDevCafe.com. If you tuned in late or didn't see all the broadcasts, you can catch this on YouTube. Give me 30 minutes or so to edit it and put it up. And again, we've been talking to Ryan, Simon, and also Jamie from Reptoid Games. Their game Fossil Hunters, which has a Kickstarter launching in just 17 or so hours, is something definitely worth checking out. Go check out the Steam store page for now. Add it to your wish list if it looks good. And we will see you next time on the Game Dev Cafe. Bye.
Cool.
Bye.